Today, we're diving into a story that is equal parts fascinating, unsettling, and a little mysterious. It's not every day that faith, fame, and explosive devices collide, but that's exactly what happened in this case. Hey guys, and welcome to the Moms and Mysteries podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Mandy, and my dear friend, Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
Oh, I am doing well. How are you?
I'm good. We just recorded a chat episode where we said things like, it's not going that great, but
Right.
yes, here we are to lie to you.
Sometimes sometimes when people email us and they're like, sometimes the intro is a little dry, and I'm like, well, because we usually just
Do
talk
you
to
want the
each other.
truth?
Yeah, I'm like, and sometimes if we tell the truth, then you're going to say like, wow, these women are depressed and need to be locked away.
It was dark before we even got to the story.
Exactly.
So enjoy the lies, okay?
Right.
No, everything is good. I am excited. We have an episode coming out Thursday that I'm really excited about, and I'm looking forward to getting into this episode. This is a story I did not really know. Yeah, and I've learned a lot.
All right, so let's just go ahead and get straight into it then. So when I say the word televangelism, you probably instantly picture a high-energy preacher on a massive stage. It's kind of giving lights, camera, action, but for church. So typically, the preacher will enthusiastically speak messages of hope and salvation while asking for money, which, of course, they need to continue the great work that they're doing spreading the word about Christianity. And the best part about all of this is you can do it all from the comfort of your living room, including the part where you donate your money. So our story today centers around two figures. There's Pat Robertson, who's the force behind the Christian Broadcasting Network, and the infamous John Osteen, who was the founder of Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. Both of these televangelists were pioneers in the field, and they reached millions with their messages. But in the late 1980s and early 90s, their lives were changed when a chilling series of events led to the detonation of pipe bombs. But who sent them and why? And that's what we're here to find out today. So the practice of televangelism dates back further than you might actually think. It began long before the days of high-def TV and social media, back in the early days of mass communication when the radio was really all you had for those such things. It's hard to imagine a life before all the technology that we do currently have, but when the radio became a thing, it was the first time voices could travel across long distances and reach ears that had never before even heard a sermon outside of their local church. In the 1930s and 40s, the FCC started to loosen the restrictions on broadcasting, which really was a game changer, and it allowed religious programs to have airtime on both the radio and later eventually on television. In 1960, a new rule emerged that granted religious groups the ability to purchase their own airtime and even establish their own networks. And that's really when the floodgates to televangelism flew wide open.
One of the earliest televangelists to enter the scene was Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. He captivated audiences on NBC radio for 2 decades before he transitioned to television in 1952. His show was called Life is Worth Living, and he later had the Fulton Sheen program. This archbishop had an engaging preaching style and would preach to a live audience while being filmed. He ended each sermon with the memorable phrase, "God loves you." His format and approach is one that many evangelical TV shows would later adopt and emulate. Another early success story was that of Billy Graham. He wasn't just a preacher, he was one of the first individuals to achieve celebrity status purely through his preaching and televangelism. His work was broadcast to millions and really cemented his place as a household name. By the 1960s, televangelism really started to explode. Figures like Jim and Tammy Faye Baker and Pat Robertson emerged, and they brought a fresh take and a new dynamic to the field. Now, instead of delivering simple sermons, they had bigger production values. There was music, testimonials, and engaging personalities. And the funding for these elaborate productions, of course, that came from the generous donations of the viewers, which is still how these televangelists get their funding for the most part. I would like to add here, there's a difference between televangelists, people that you're seeing on TV, and prosperity gospel. That's a new thing that's come up like in the last decade, I feel like, the name. People who a lot of their sermons are basically like, God wants to bless you, and it's money, money, money. And televangelism, at least at first, seems like it started more like we're sharing God to people all around, but not having the focus on money. Unfortunately, those two things sometimes go hand in hand. But one thing you may or may not find surprising, and I really did, is that televangelism as we know it is distinctly an American thing. The messages often intertwine religious beliefs with concepts of winning, wealth, and power, which a lot of that does have to do with the prosperity gospel.
So let's turn our attention to the first of our two main events this week, and that is the bombing that targeted Reverend John Osteen. Of course, though, we have to get into a little bit about the man himself. John Osteen was born on August 21st, 1921 in Fort Worth, Texas. He found his calling when he was a teenager, and I found this really interesting because I feel like it is early in life, but usually I would expect that somebody like John Osteen was raised
raised in church.
Right, raised in church and would discover this about themselves before they were this age. So he said that when he was 17 years old, he was leaving a nightclub and he started thinking about God. And weeks later, he was preaching in Paris, Texas, which is like, I have a lot of questions, right? Like,
yeah,
you go, like, I do have questions about how you go from thinking about God at a nightclub to preaching 2 weeks later. That does sound a little out there to me. So his journey took him across the United States, where he preached everywhere he went. And eventually he did pursue a formal education, and he earned a bachelor's degree from John Brown University and a master's from Northern Baptist Theological Seminary. John served as an assistant pastor in San Diego and a minister in Hamlin, Texas. He became a traveling preacher for a while before settling down in Baytown. And throughout his early career, he was known for his dedication to expanding educational programs and growing congregations. But John's most significant and recognizable legacy is without a doubt Lakewood Church. He founded the church in 1959 and held the very first services in a converted feed store barn. John had very personal motives for starting this church. His daughter Lisa was born with cerebral palsy, and John believed that prayer had miraculously healed her. And that experience really fueled this desire to create a place of worship that was rooted in faith and healing. And we're going to get into so much more after a quick break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
One of my very favorite things about being a parent is watching my kids discover how they learn best. And that's why I really love the idea behind K-12 powered schools, because they're designed to help each student shine in their own way. K-12 powered schools are accredited, tuition-free online public schools for kindergarten through 12th grade with a flexible, engaging curriculum that actually meets kids where they are. Whether your child loves to do deep diving into a specific topic or maybe needs time to explore at their own pace, K-12 helps make learning click. And the best part? You get the support of state-certified teachers trained to teach online, plus hands-on activities, interactive technology, and even extracurriculars and in-person events, so learning doesn't feel isolated or one-size-fits-all. They've also been doing this for over 25 years, and it shows. K-12 helps students build the skills they need for the future with the freedom and the structure that families love today. Now's the time to explore your options before the new school year starts. Join the more than 3 million families who have chosen K-12 and empower your student to reach their full potential now. Go to k12.com/moms today to find a tuition-free K-12 powered school near you and enroll now. That's the letter K, the number 12.com/moms. K12.com/moms. The other night, I had the best dinner, and I say that as someone who was actually in the middle of a call with my insurance company while texting my mom back and trying to remember if I'd actually drank any water yet at 6 p.m. But thanks to Suvie, I got to eat a Mediterranean salmon bowl that tasted like I'd spent an hour on it in the kitchen, when in reality, I spent about 30 seconds tapping a recipe card. That's right, Suvie is a smart countertop oven and a gourmet meal delivery service that takes the stress out of dinner. You pick your meals, scan the tap to cook card, and Suvie handles the rest, including refrigeration until it's time to cook. So I set it all up in the morning, and when I wrapped up my last call of the day, dinner was hot and ready. There are over 50 meals to choose from, and new ones are added weekly, and everything's totally flexible, from how often you order to your dietary preferences. And when I say this thing does everything, I literally mean everything. Air fry, slow cook, bake, roast, all while sitting on your counter looking cute and not taking up your night. Suvie even offers a 100-day risk-free trial, so there's nothing really to lose. Go to suvie.com/moms to get 16 free meals when you order. That's SUVIE.com/moms. That's moms starts with an S, to get 16 free meals with your risk-free trial. Save time, eat better with Suvie. And now back to the episode. So before the break, we talked about the rise of televangelism and the early days of big-name preachers like John Osteen and Pat Robertson. We also covered how Lakewood Church came to be. Lakewood Church became known as the Oasis of Love. The church congregation was primarily white, but it was notably multiracial, which earned John respect from local politicians. Lakewood grew to become one of the largest churches in Houston, with a congregation of between 10 and 15,000, and that was back in 1990. The church building itself was massive and could seat 8,200 people. The AP described it as being the size of 2 football fields and equipped with large TV monitors to ensure everyone could see the pastor. Lakewood practiced faith healing and speaking in tongues, which became a hallmark of the movement by the 1960s. While this movement resembles Pentecostalism, it has distinct differences. This movement emphasized the experience of the Holy Spirit, which can be manifested through spiritual gifts like speaking in tongues and healing, as well as communal prayer. Lakewood was known for having a glitzy, enthusiastic nature, and music was a huge part of the whole thing. In 1982, John brought his son Joel into the ministry to help establish a TV presence for the church. John's sermons started being broadcast nationally on the Christian Broadcasting Network, which was founded by Pat Robertson. And even though he had a big reach, some people said John Osteen wasn't really that widely known. In his televised sermons, he was vocal about his desire for school prayer and his opposition for abortion. The whole Osteen family was very involved in the church. 5 out of 6 of John's kids worked for Lakewood, and his wife, Dodie, served as co-pastor. John's daughter, Lisa, played a crucial role as the director of ministries. She oversaw 25 volunteer ministries, publications, and literature outreaches, and she even founded the church's Healing Center for Marriages after her own divorce. She also wrote a book called 6 Lies the Devil Uses to Destroy Marriages. It seemed as though things were going mostly according to plan for John and his megachurch, but on January 30th, 1990, tragedy struck. It was an ordinary Tuesday when 30-year-old Lisa was opening her father's mail at the church, and this was something that was normal for her to do. It was part of her job. And on this day, Lisa was opening a package that had been picked up from the post office earlier that day. Lisa said that the package felt a little heavier than average and that it was a little unusual and different. There was a typed label addressed to John Osteen and a typed return address. The box itself was sealed with a single piece of tape.
Lisa was in her office in a church building across the street from the main Lakewood church when she opened the package, which was resting in her lap. As soon as she opened the box, a pipe bomb containing nails as long as 8 inches exploded. The bomb had 20 pounds of shrapnel and nails inside of it. The Houston police sergeant later said that Lisa was lucky to be alive. Her office was absolutely shredded, her chair was destroyed, and nails were embedded in the walls all around the room. Lisa was rushed to Methodist Hospital, where she was treated for flash burns and bruises on her abdomen and thighs. She did remain conscious throughout the initial experience, and she was in good condition, but she did later have abdominal surgery and spent 11 days in the hospital. John Osteen commented that they would be praying for those responsible. He said, "We know that they're sick, they need help." Lisa's own account of the explosion is truly horrifying. She described it like an atom bomb exploding into her and what felt like an electric shock going through her body, and she said she felt like she was on fire. The blast propelled her 5 feet from her chair as nearby church employees heard a loud pop. Lisa stood up and started running and screaming for help. John Osteen later told the congregation that he believed God had sent angels to prevent him from leaving the house that morning. Otherwise, he would have opened the package himself, which I feel like is a little tacky to say when your daughter literally
Tacky?
opened.
That's insane to say. Like, it's almost like saying, well, thank goodness it was her and not me. Like, sir,
That's your
as a
child.
parent,
Right.
yeah, like, no, that's not how this works.
No. Thankfully, though, Lisa did make a full recovery and returned to her church duties about a month later. The investigation into the bombing began immediately with the FBI, ATF, and Houston police and postal inspectors all brought in to help. John told authorities that they really had not received any threats, and he was also known to have a solid reputation in Houston. The case was unlike anything the Houston police had ever seen, and they didn't have any immediate leads. They began by focusing on finding a postmark on the package and just trying to go from there.
Just 3 days after the bombing, on February 2nd, Houston police started looking into a West Virginia welder named Jeffrey Mark Boggs. A car belonging to Jeffrey was found abandoned the day after the bombing at a rest stop on I-10, which was about 86 miles east of Houston. An officer spotted the vehicle and worried that someone inside of it might be injured or dead. There were actually curtains blocking the windows. Way to look suspicious, putting curtains to block your windows. But when the officer approached the vehicle, he realized that nobody was inside, but he did find a homemade illegal firearm. When Jeffrey returned to the car, police were waiting to arrest him. He was actually wearing a bulletproof vest and shin guards and appeared to have been living in this vehicle. The bomb squad found hot glue sticks and molly bolts in the car, which were similar to some of the debris in the pipe bomb that was sent to John Osteen. For those who don't know, and I didn't, a molly bolt is a type of bolt that's meant to fan out after being inserted through a wall. So the idea behind using them in a bomb is obviously to cause as much destruction as possible. Jeffrey Boggs was indicted for possession of an unregistered firearm, but he was never charged in connection with the bombing. Also on February 2nd, the AP reported that investigators were looking into the possibility that the bomb had been mailed from Elizabethtown, North Carolina, which is over 1,000 miles from Houston. Interestingly, the police chief in Elizabethtown stated that there was no indication that a person from their town had mailed the package. Federal agents went to the post office in late February, and they showed a composite sketch of a man they believed had sent the bomb. The suspect was described as being white, 6 feet tall, 170 pounds, with a neat appearance. It was thought that the bomb had been mailed between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. on January 26th.
Investigators spoke with Lisa Osteen's ex-husband, Alan, who was a minister in Tennessee. They searched his home, looking for any evidence that he was involved in sending the pipe bomb. Alan's lawyer later said that Alan was freaked out when the police came looking for information. He said he hadn't seen Lisa or anyone from the Osteen family since he and Lisa divorced in 1983 after just less than 2 years of marriage. But the police said that this was just a routine part of investigating, and they were looking into all friends and family. Alan actually was not considered a suspect. Nearly a month after the bombing, on February 27th, the U.S. Postal Service announced a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person who sent the bomb. Even though there were no concrete leads, the public was still really quick to draw a connection between the Lakewood church pipe bomb and two other bombings that occurred in December of 1989, which was just a month prior. People from across the southern United States worried that this was a pattern emerging. Back on December 16th, a nail-filled bomb was mailed to Judge Robert Smith Vance at his home in Birmingham, Alabama. When he opened the package, he was tragically killed. Early rumors suggested that a Colombian cocaine cartel could be responsible since they had previously made threats against U.S. judges. But then 2 days later, another nail-filled bomb took the life of Robert Robertson, who was a prominent Black civil rights attorney and city alderman in Savannah, Georgia. The bomb detonated in his office. Shockingly, though, just hours before Robert's death, authorities had successfully removed another bomb from the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta. Furthermore, another bomb was found at the NAACP office in Jacksonville, Florida, but it was defused before it could detonate. These bombs all had striking similarities. They were all filled with nails, they had different postmarks, and they had fake return addresses, as well as an excessive number of postage stamps. And we're going to get into the rest of the story after one last break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
Back to school season is officially here, which means my calendar is packed and my kids are asking for new everything, all while my wallet is quietly weeping in the corner. But the one thing that's making it all a little easier is Rakuten. I started using Rakuten a couple of years ago during back-to-school shopping, and now I'm mad I just didn't start it sooner. It's really the most rewarding way to shop because you can stack cash back on top of sales and deals at stores you're probably already shopping at, like Target, Ulta, and Nike, and it's so easy to use. You just Shop like normal, and Rakuten sends you your cash back through PayPal or check. The idea is simple. The stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares that money with you. I've used it on everything from sneakers to skincare to school supplies because Rakuten really works across everything from fashion, beauty, electronics, travel, home essentials, and more. It's free to sign up, and it takes just seconds. And with 17 million members already saving, clearly I wasn't the first one to figure this out. In fact, Rakuten members have earned over 4.6 billion with a B, in cash back. So now it's your turn. Download the free Rakuten app or go to Rakuten.com to start saving today. That's Rakuten, Rakuten.com. And now back to the episode. Before the break, we've covered the Lakewood church bombing and the baffling lack of answers surrounding it, as well as 2 other bombings that occurred just the month before. These bombing incidents that claimed the lives of 2 men started to shift the focus towards the chilling possibility that the attacks were racially motivated, as Judge Vance had presided over cases involving racial issues and Robert Robertson was actually a civil rights lawyer. However, investigators at the time did not believe there was a connection between these bombings and the one that was sent to Lakewood Church. Ultimately, a man named Walter Moody was charged with the murders of Judge Vance and Robert Robertson. He ended up going to trial twice and was sentenced to over 400 years in prison the first time and then sentenced to death in the second trial. He was only actually convicted of Judge Vance's murder. Walter Moody was executed by lethal injection in 2018, and he was never linked to the Osteen bombing, nor the next bombing that we're about to get into now. So fast forward about 4 months after the Lakewood Church bomb to April 27th, 1990. That's when another bomb showed up at the Christian Broadcasting Network headquarters in Virginia Beach. The target there was Pat Robertson, who we mentioned earlier. Pat had been one of the titans in American televangelism for decades. His early life included time in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve and a well-rounded education. He had a bachelor's from Washington and Lee, a law degree from Yale, and a master's of divinity from New York Theological Seminary. In 1959, Pat moved to Tidewater, Virginia with his wife and 3 kids to pursue his vision of buying a bankrupt television station and transforming it into what eventually became the Christian Broadcasting Network. CBN aired its first show on October 1st, 1961, and today CBN is still a global force and broadcasts in 138 countries and 39 languages, which is actually pretty impressive for someone who went to just buy a bankrupt TV station.
Yeah, no kidding. The most popular program on CBN began in 1966, and it's called the 700 Club. The program was inspired by telethons and featured Pat asking for 700 people to pledge $10 a month to support CBN. The show is a blend of viewer questions, viewers calling in, stories of people whose lives have been transformed by their faith, and interviews with news stories. After CBN took off, Robertson founded International Family Entertainment Incorporated in 1990. Their main network was the Family Channel, which eventually evolved into ABC Family and then into Freeform. He also established Regent University in Virginia Beach in 1977, which enrolls over 10,000 students today. Pat even ventured into politics at one point and competed for the Republican presidential nomination in 1987. John Osteen made a public endorsement for Pat during his campaign, but ultimately it wasn't enough and he lost to George H.W. Bush. CBN was no stranger, though, to hate mail and death threats. Pat had a very outspoken view on a lot of very controversial issues, so he was someone who drew a lot of attention to himself. The network had actually already received fake bombs as well as human waste in the mail.
Yuck.
You can understand why they would have a very strict protocol around security and making sure suspicious packages were actually safe. So what they would do is run them through an X-ray machine. On April 27th, a security guard named Scott Sheepters was called into the mailroom to examine a suspicious package at around 11 a.m. He described this particular package as being about 6 inches long and 2 inches high, which immediately is suspicious because what comes in a box?
What?
That doesn't make, I've never gotten, I feel like,
not even a book,
just
is
long
in that,
and, right, just a long rectangle. That would definitely be suspicious.
Right.
So it had Pat's name typed on a mailing label on it, and it had a North Carolina return address. Scott put the package through the x-ray machine twice, but he didn't see anything dangerous. So he decided to use extreme caution, but to go ahead and open this package and see what was going on with it anyway. So he put the package down and he stepped back as far as he possibly could and still reach it. And he just used one hand to lift the tucked in flap of the box. As soon as the box opened, it exploded. Scott said he didn't see anything, but he heard a noise that sounded like a gunshot.
Despite being in severe pain and bleeding from shrapnel wounds, Scott managed to walk to the security desk for help. He was rushed to the hospital where he went for surgery to remove shrapnel from his leg, and he spent several days recovering. Pat Robertson later commented that if the bomb had been a bit more sophisticated, it would have killed Scott. Likewise, the trauma doctor who treated him said that if he had been holding the package closer to his body and the shrapnel exploded into his chest, he could have very well died. Right away, Pat started pointing his finger at anti-Christian extremism and said that the bombing was the work of a deranged individual who wanted to silence the Christian voice in the community. He actually drew a direct correlation to the bombing that targeted John Osteen and referenced another crime that had happened recently, the arson of Christian singer Sandy Patty's recording studio. So Pat Robertson defended the security measures at CBN and said that, in his opinion, the security worked. The bomb didn't get to him. What is with these dudes and just saying, thank goodness I didn't get it?
Well,
Sucks
at least
for
in
you.
this case, it is like hired security and not your daughter.
Okay, but that's pretty gross.
I mean,
Like, I pay you to open bombs for me. But no, I get what you mean.
Right.
It's just, what on earth? Just, I feel like those are inside thoughts that you should never say out loud, and especially not to the media,
It's
which
true.
is what it sounds
right.
like
It
he
is
did.
true. Like, yes, that might be the case. That yes, that is why you have security. That's the whole point, right? To like make sure
Right.
that they inspect things and they're clear before they get to you. But yeah, if something actually happens to the person who signed up to do that for you,
Mhm.
the least you could do is not be like, well, better you than me, you know, like,
Wow, thank goodness.
right.
See you later, toodaloo. He did say, though, that he felt terrible that the security officer was injured by someone who was trying to get to him, but he basically said, yep, that's why I have security, like Mandy was saying. Investigators knew that the similarities between the Lakewood church bombing and the CBN bombing were too striking to ignore. Senior ATF agent Paul Lyons said, quote, let's just say there are sufficient similarities in both situations that have caused us to concentrate our investigation in the Fayetteville-Bladen County area, end quote. He later confirmed that both bombs had a return address in that general region of North Carolina. In May of 1990, police released 2 composite sketches of suspects in the cases. These 2 sketches were different, but they were also drawn by different sketch artists. The police believed that both sketches could be the same man, which would suggest that there was one single perpetrator responsible for both attacks. Both sketches depicted a white man about 6 feet tall and 175 pounds with dark hair and was in his early 30s. After these 2 bombings, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service issued a warning to all religious broadcasters and churches across the country to use extreme caution when opening packages.
As hard as it might be to believe, no official suspect has ever been named in these 2 bombings, and the mystery of who sent them remains unsolved. But of course, the internet does have its own theories. One prominent theory points the finger at a man named Eric Rudolph. And if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because he is the man responsible for the 1996 Atlanta Summer Olympics bombing, which killed 1 person and injured over 100 others. Eric went on to bomb 2 more public places between 1996 and 1998, which resulted in further injuries and the death of a police officer. Eric was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list in 1998 and was eventually arrested in 2003. He pleaded guilty to federal charges and received several life sentences with no possibility of parole. The reason people on the internet think he is responsible for the Televangelist bombings is actually kind of compelling. He does somewhat match the descriptions in the composite sketches, and he lived in North Carolina around the time of the bombings, which is where they have traced the bombs back to being mailed from. However, Eric has never been publicly linked to the bombings by the police, and his involvement is still purely just an internet theory. The National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crimes put together a profile of the bomber, suggesting that the perpetrator was likely experiencing some sort of stress in their life at the time of the attacks. They stated that the people who were close to the bomber would likely have noticed some type of change in that person's behavior. Both Lisa Osteen and Scott Sheepters, who were the victims of these attacks, said that they just wanted the bomber to be caught, not necessarily because they wanted retribution, but because they believe that this individual needs serious help.
And they're going to do it again if
Right.
you just keep getting away with it. So John Osteen passed away from heart failure in 1999, but that wasn't the end of Lakewood Church. His son Joel, who you probably know better, took over as pastor, and under he and his wife Victoria's leadership, the church has expanded dramatically. In 2003, they actually acquired the Compaq Center for their new sanctuary, and that's actually the former home of the Houston Rockets. So yes, it's literally a stadium. There's also a lot of controversy over what he's done with this stadium, especially including what they did or didn't do during Hurricane Harvey. That's a little Google you can do for yourself. And as of 2023, Lakewood Church has over 45,000 people in attendance each week. It's one of the largest churches in the United States.
Can I just say, I get it, right? Like, I get it. Good for you guys. You got a huge church. But like, as a person, I don't even like to go to like a stadium that reaches full capacity for a concert a couple times a year. Like, that gives me anxiety. Like, to think about going to a weekly church service at a place like this does not appeal to me, like, whatsoever. I
No.
don't see the appeal of going downtown to go.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it, right? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. And then being in a church that size, it's like you never really have to be a part of it, if that makes sense. Like, you can
Right.
say, oh, I go to this church.
What
What do you do there?
I just go.
Nothing.
I'm
Because
one
there's
of
45,000
45,000.
people.
Right.
Exactly. Like, people that go to smaller churches, a lot of times they're involved in children's ministry or there's something, but this is like a place you can go, say you go, and that's it.
Yeah.
Just my opinion. Joel also continues his father's broadcasting legacy with his sermons reaching an estimated 200 million households across the country. Pat Robertson continued to be a prominent figure until he stepped down from the 700 Club in 2021 at the age of 92. He actually passed away back in 2023 at the age of 93. The show still airs every weekday and is filmed in front of a live audience at CBN's headquarters in Virginia Beach. CBN's website reports that the 700 Club can be seen in 96% of homes in the country.
That's wild.
It really is. I'm really surprised they didn't catch who did this. It doesn't seem like a sophisticated thing they had going on, like putting one piece of tape on a package. Like, to me, that made me anxious because I'm like, that could have blown up to anyone.
Yeah. I know. And, I also always, like, thank goodness, like, there's not bombings like this that still really happen. But, like, man, did we go through a couple decades where bombings were, like, a thing? Like, that's just, it's a weird concept to me to think about mailing, like, a dangerous device. Well, and that it was actually as big of a thing as it was back then, like 70s,
Totally.
80s, 90s. Like, there was a lot of that kind of thing.
Well, now you have to answer all those questions when you mail things at the post office because of stuff like this. And I'm always terrified I accidentally have one of the things they're saying,
Right.
because they just list it so quickly and you're looking at it. I'm like, well, I don't want to look nervous because I don't think I have any, but like, I need a second to think if I have any.
Right.
And meanwhile, it's just like, a piece of paper.
Meanwhile, the question is literally, is this a bomb?
Could you tell me if I opened it for you? Can you tell me? Yeah, I don't do well with that. But yeah, that's, it's interesting that they've never figured out who did it. And the Eric Rudolph of it all, I was not expecting that connection at all.
Yeah, it's definitely wild. Either way, no bombings, please. Bombings are definitely, like, nails exploding. Weird.
That is a terrifying thing to think of. Like, I mean, if you've watched a movie, you've seen something like that where that is just terrifying. I don't like to use a nail gun. I don't want to use a nail gun. I'm terrified. I'm not going to remember how it works and shoot myself with it.
For sure.
I'm just not that bright.
No, very scary.
I can't be trusted with anything.
Yeah, so all right, thank you guys for listening. That was a story this week. We will be back next week, same time, same place, new story.
Have a great week.
Bye.